Donald Trump announcing he is pausing many of the tariffs he slapped on countries all over the world except China. The CBC's Chris Reyes is tracking the latest on the stunning reversal by Donald Trump on reciprocal tariffs. We should point out that the U.S. administration has imposed sectoral tariffs, if you will, on Canadian autos, on steel and aluminum. And so we're trying to figure out what all this means for Canada. But generally speaking, we were not part of the reciprocal tariffs on so-called Liberation Day 1 week ago today. But what more do we know about who this applies to, Chris?
I'm feeling dizzy. Are you feeling dizzy?
So am I.
Andrew, just following all of this, it's hard to believe that it's only been 1 week since Liberation Day when President Trump held up that big board with dozens of countries indicating the reciprocal tariffs that they would be receiving. Vietnam, 46%, Madagascar, 47%, the EU, Thailand, Switzerland, Indonesia. And now if you blinked for about 5 minutes just in the last hour, you would have missed that board no longer applies for the next 90 days. So I want to start from when this first developed with a TruthSocial post from President Trump. So let's just read that very carefully because this is straight from President Trump. And then afterwards, his Treasury Secretary had to explain the whole thing in front of the White House lawn because, you'll get what I mean when I read to you this post and how confusing it is and short on details. So let's just go through it line by line. So Donald Trump posted at 1:18 p.m. Eastern Time that based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, I am hereby raising tariff charged to China by the U.S. To 125%. So that is up from the 104% that it was this morning, which was already an escalation from last week. But then the other point that he made on this post that I think really got a reaction and really an earthquake across the world is this part where he talks about this 90-day pause for all of the other countries that have not retaliated. And he said some 75 countries have called representatives of the U.S., including Departments of Commerce, Treasury, USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation. My strong suggestion retaliated that because they didn't retaliate against the U.S., I've authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10% effective immediately. So, of course, the clarification that we're trying to get right now is whether those larger reciprocal tariffs, that's completely off the table right now, at least for the 90 days, and those 10% remaining. And, of course, there are different tariffs that apply to Canada, applied on aluminum and steel, applied on auto parts that were not CUSMA or the new NAFTA compliant. And we're waiting for word from the White House exactly, how this applies to Canada. And I can almost guarantee that almost everybody in the world is probably scrambling to see what exactly this means. Now, what we heard from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bissett,
to add to the confusion
on the White House lawn, to add to the confusion is that this is really Donald Trump using tariffs as a leverage point. And he said no one creates leverage from himself better than President Trump. And he said that for those countries that held their ground, that did not retaliate, this is essentially their reward, this 90-day pause. And he referred to some negotiations that are already taking place with the U.S.'s trading partners, including Vietnam, who he said the Trump administration is talking to today. He also mentioned that Japan will be sending a trade team over shortly. And this is all part of the negotiation tactic that Donald Trump has been using. And we even heard from Caroline Leavitt almost admonishing the media, saying that they obviously didn't read The Art of the Deal, because this is all part of Donald Trump's strategy. But again, I mean, this has only happened in the last hour, Andrew, and I think everybody's heads are spinning, trying to make sense of all of this.
And unfortunately, I mean, to add to the confusion, and I think we have a clip that I think will capture this, but if we don't, we'll talk about it on the other side. This is the Treasury Secretary who was asked about Canada and Mexico and whether or not any of this kind of pullback applies to Canada or Mexico. So let's just listen to what he had to say.
President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago. The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we have just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith.
Okay, so that's the general, but Chris, I did hear him because, you know, we've been watching, and he was asked specifically about Canada, and he said, yes, this applies to Canada as well, but Canada wasn't included in the reciprocal tariffs on so-called Liberation Day a week ago. So it's hard to kind of understand whether that was just a mistake on his part, or what that meant.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I'm sensing from what Secretary Bessent is saying is that sort of that 10% baseline tariff is the floor for the Trump administration, and that's going to remain. And all of those other higher reciprocal tariffs, which represents the ceiling, is what's up for negotiation. And the reason why the Trump administration revealed that ceiling is to use it as leverage, basically to show the rest of the world how far the Trump administration is willing to go to get the kind of trade deal that they want. I mean, let me read to you a quote from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, as she was sort of ushering Bessent back into the White House, because no doubt he has a busy day today. She said, you know, we finally have a president here at the White House who's playing the long game, who is doing what's right for the American worker and our industries here at home, together with a fantastic team, and they'll be focusing on negotiating these good deals to put the American workers first. And you know, there were a lot of questions from the press pool there at the White House, why he would announce something like this at this moment, and whether this was a reaction to some of the criticisms from, you know, within the Trump base, including some pretty high-profile investors like Bill Ackman going on X to say that he even though he doesn't necessarily disagree with the tariffs, that he would recommend a 90-day pause as these negotiations take place, whether this was a reaction to that. I mean, we have not heard from President Trump directly beyond this, really. I mean, it's a rambling post. It's a rambling tweet. It's what we've come to know of Donald Trump's post on social media. But we're certainly not getting those details here. Yesterday, he gave a very long public address at an event. It might be likely that we'll hear more details as he speaks and takes another podium in the days to come.
Chris, thank you. That is the CBC's Chris Reyes live in New York. And this latest curveball from Donald Trump has had an instant and huge impact on the markets. Anisha Patel from our CBC Business Unit is here to tell us all the latest. And we should, again, just say, we just don't know what this means for Canada. But generally speaking, the markets on both sides of the border like that the Trump administration seems to be pulling back from its hardcore tariff policies.
You bet, Andrew. And stocks are soaring, as you mentioned. And, you know, we really heard the rhetoric from Wall Street ramping up the past 2 days, warning that these tariffs were going to be bad for the global economy. We heard Bill Ackman, the hedge fund manager, call exactly for this, a 90-day pause so that countries could negotiate. So you see the reaction. The TSX up almost 1,100 points. The Dow Jones up 6.6%, 2,500 points. That is a huge gain gain on the day, making back some of the losses from the past 4 or 5 days. We are also seeing the S&P 500, the NASDAQ also gaining. And when we look at individual stocks, Apple up 12%, Nvidia up 15%, Walmart up 10%, Nike up 10%. These companies were all going to be hit very hard by these tariffs, and you can see the positive reaction. We're also seeing oil prices bounce back up. They were down 5% this morning on concerns of a global recession, and they have bounced back up a little bit, up 3% right now. One of the concerns, though, Andrew, is that this is a 90-day pause. This is continued uncertainty for businesses. If you were a company having your cargo being shipped out of Vietnam last night at 1 a.m., you would have been hit by a 46% tariff. And now, if you have your cargo getting shipped out, there are no tariffs. So, this continued uncertainty continues to weigh on businesses. For now, though, this is a really positive reaction.
Because we've been seeing a trend, and you were telling me this, of selling off U.S. government bonds, traditionally seen as a safe investment. So what can you tell us about that and how that can really spook investors?
Yeah, there was a lot of concern last night when we saw this happening with bonds. The thing about bonds is that the market is much bigger than the stock market. So when things happen in the bond market, it's an even bigger reaction than the stock market. They usually move in small increments, and in the last 4 days, they were really moving quite quickly. The problem was that, investors, when they sell off in stocks, they usually go to bonds, and they were selling bonds too. Experts say that was really concerning. Take a listen.
U.S. Treasury bonds are supposed to be the world's safe, liquid, sovereign asset. They're supposed to be a flight to quality and safety when market turmoil like this happens. That's not happening right now. It shows a lack of confidence in American securities and in the American economy.
So there was a real concern that this trade war would morph into a financial crisis. Right now, there's been a slight pullback in U.S. government bond yields, but that was a really big concern, and it may have influenced this decision.
All right, so much to watch for, Nisha. Thank you. The CBC's Nisha Patel.